Karoline Leavitt, a rising star in the political scene, has been no stranger to controversy. A former aide to Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, Leavitt made waves in the media after being invited onto Jimmy Kimmel Live to discuss her political career and views. The invitation, which many thought would be a typical late-night appearance, soon turned into a spectacle of tensions and clashes as Leavitt walked off the set mid-in after a fiery exchange with Jimmy Kimmel. Leavitt, who had gained national attention for her bold political stances and outspoken views, entered the interview with a sense of confidence. As a millennial voice in a highly polarized political environment, she had become a figure of interest to both the conservative and liberal audiences. Kimmel, known for his often playful and sometimes sharp political commentary, had invited her on the show under the assumption that it would be a lively but respectful conversation about politics. However, what transpired during the interview left both the audience and viewers at home stunned. The interview started innocuously enough. Kimmel began by asking Leavitt about her background, her work in Congress, and her rise within the Republican Party. Leavitt, dressed smartly in a dark suit, looked poised as she discussed her career. She spoke with passion about her time working for Congresswoman Stephanie and expressed her commitment to conservative values, emphasizing her belief in a smaller government, fiscal responsibility, and strong national security. Kimmel, for the most part, seemed genuinely interested in her perspective, albeit with a few typical jabs aimed at her more conservative viewpoints. The tension, however, started to build as Kimmel shifted the conversation to the current political climate, particularly focusing on issues like the Biden administration's policies, the economy, and the contentious battle over voting rights. The first sign of discomfort came when Kimmel raised the topic of voter suppression and recent election laws in states like Georgia and Texas. Leavitt, as expected, defended the new laws, stating that they were necessary to ensure election integrity. Kimmel, not one to hold back, pushed back with pointed questions about whether these laws disproportionately affected minority communities and whether they were part of a broader trend of undermining democracy. Leavitt's response, calm and collected, was that the laws were simply about ensuring fair elections and preventing voter fraud, a topic that had become central to the Republican Party's talking points. However, Kimmel wasn't convinced. He asked her about the evidence for widespread voter fraud, pointing out that numerous investigations and audits had found no evidence of fraud in the 2020 election. Leavitt, undeterred, continued to defend the Republican position, insisting that the laws were necessary to restore confidence in the electoral process. At this point, the conversation took a sharper turn. Kimmel, who had been attempting to keep the discussion light and humorous, began to challenge Leavitt more directly. He pointed out the hypocrisy of supporting voter ID laws while simultaneously questioning the legitimacy of the 2020 election results, a sentiment shared by many in the Republican Palmore. Leavitt, appearing increasingly agitated, tried to explain that the two issues were not connected. But Kimmel was relentless. "You can't have it both ways," Kimmel said, his voice rising slightly. "If you believe in election integrity, you can't just claim fraud when you lose. You have to trust the system, right?" Leavitt, visibly frustrated but maintaining her composure, responded, "I do trust the system, but when there are legitimate concerns about the process, those concerns should be addressed. We can't just sweep things under the rug because it's politically inconvenient." Kimmel, sensing the tension rising, quickly shifted the conversation to another hot-button issue, the role of women in politics. He pointed out that as a young woman in the Republican Party, Leavitt was part of a movement that had been accused of not doing enough to support women's rights and gender equality. Leavitt, taking a deep breath, responded by highlighting her work with conservative women's organizations and advocating for policies that would empower women, especially in terms of economic opportunity and personal freedom. However, it was clear that Kimmel wasn't going to let up. His questions became more pointed, suggesting that Leavitt's stance on issues like abortion, healthcare, and reproductive rights were out of touch with the views of many American women. Leavitt, becoming visibly irritated, tried to defend her positions, but Kimmel continued to press her on these issues, asking whether she truly believed that her party's policies were benefiting women or whether they were more focused on pandering to a conservative base. It was at this moment that things began to escalate. Kimmel, who had been poking fun at Leavitt throughout the interview, made a comment about how her party's stance on women's health was damaging to the very women she claimed to support. Leavitt, her patience thinning, shot back. It's easy to sit here and criticize without offering real solutions. Your side of the aisle is quick to point fingers, but where are the policies to help women? You can't just tear down everything without building something better. The exchange, now tense and increasingly heated, continued for several more minutes. Kimmel, clearly enjoying the back and forth, continued to press her on controversial topics like healthcare and gun control, all the while using his signature humor to make his points. Leavitt, growing more frustrated, held firm in her views. But it was clear that the conversation was becoming less about respectful dialogue and more about a battle of political ideologies. Then, in a move that shocked everyone in the studio and those watching at home, Karoline Leavitt abruptly stood up from her seat and walked off the stage. The audience, stunned into silence, watched as she made her way to the exit, not looking back. Kimmel, taken aback by the sudden departure, seemed momentarily speechless before trying to regain control of the situation. "Well, I guess we lost her," Kimmel said with a shrug before attempting to make light of the situation. But it was clear that the mood in the studio had shifted. The once light-hearted interview had turned into a dramatic confrontation, leaving viewers wondering what had just happened. For many, Leavitt's walk-off was seen as a bold and defiant move. It was a statement that she wasn't willing to play the role of the docile political figure who could be easily mocked or manipulated. She had come to the show to stand her ground and defend her views. But Kimmel's line of questioning had crossed a line. Her exit, while controversial, was also a demonstration of her unwillingness to back down in the face of a hostile environment. It was a moment that would only add to her growing reputation as a firebrand within the Republican Party. In the aftermath of the incident, social media exploded with reactions from both sides of the political spectrum. Supporters of Leavitt praised her for standing up to Kimmel, while critics accused her of being too thin-skinned and unable to handle tough questions. The incident quickly became a topic of discussion on cable news and political commentary shows, with pundits debating whether her walk-off was a clever strategic move or a sign of political immaturity. For Leavitt, the controversy likely only added to her profile. Whether you agree or disagree with her views, there's no denying that she knows how to generate attention. The walk-off incident became a defining moment in her political journey, one that will undoubtedly be referenced whenever she is interviewed in the future. It was a bold statement, and while it may have cost her a few fans, it certainly solidified her position as a fierce advocate for her beliefs. In the world of politics, moments like these are rare but impactful. Karoline Leavitt's appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live was supposed to be just another interview, another opportunity for a political figure to share their thoughts with the public. Instead, it became a defining moment in her career, a moment that demonstrated her unwillingness to compromise her principles, even when faced with the pressure of a late-night host trying to provoke her. In the end, the walk-off may have been the ultimate demonstration of her confidence and her commitment to the values she holds dear. Whether or not it will help her in her political future remains to be seen. But for now, Karoline Leavitt has made her mark as one of the boldest and most unyielding voices in American politics today.